It was past midnight when Olivia heard the footsteps again. Soft, measured, dragging slightly, just like they had been every night for the past week. She lived alone in a small third-floor apartment with no neighbors above. The footsteps always began directly overhead, pacing slowly from one side of her ceiling to the other. Then they'd stop. She'd stare up at the plaster, breath held, waiting. They always resumed. A rhythm, a routine. On the third night, she called the landlord. "No one lives above you," he said. "That unit's been empty for months." She didn't sleep that night. By the fifth night, the steps were joined by something else, a low creaking, like wood being pulled apart. Then the scratching began. It wasn't loud, but deliberate. The sound of fingernails dragging along the floorboards, or maybe underneath them. She placed her phone on the nightstand and started recording. In the morning, the audio was silent. Not even her own breathing was there. On the seventh night, she decided to confront it. Holding a flashlight, she climbed the stairs to the empty unit above. The door was unlocked. The apartment was cold and pitch black. She stepped inside and the door slammed shut behind her. The flashlight flickered, then died. From the darkness ahead, the footsteps began again. This time, not on the ceiling, but the floor she stood on. They were coming toward her. Next story. Tyler always joked about ghosts until the cabin. He and 3 friends rented it deep in the woods for a weekend of drinking and fishing. The kind of place with no Wi-Fi, no cell signal, and definitely no neighbors. The first night was quiet, cold too. They joked about the draft and the strange creaking floorboards. But the second night was different. Around 2 a.m., the fire had burned down, and they were half asleep when the door to the cabin creaked open on its own. Nobody moved. Then came the knock. 1, 2, 3. Software. Deliberate. They grabbed flashlights and checked outside. Nothing. Just the trees swaying in the wind. Back inside, they locked the door and tried to laugh it off. But in the morning, there were muddy footprints leading from the door to Tyler's sleeping bag. Only his. That night, Tyler woke up screaming. He said someone had been crouching over him, watching, breathing. They wanted to leave, but Tyler refused. He said they were overreacting. The next morning, Tyler was gone. No note, no tracks, no sign of struggle. Just the door, wide open, and a message scratched into the wood above his sleeping bag. He stayed too long. Next story. There's a rumor in my hometown, a dare, really. They say if you go into the old train tunnel at midnight and walk all the way to the other side without turning around, you'll hear them. The passengers. It's been abandoned for decades. No tracks. Just a black, damp tunnel carved into the hill. When I was 17, I tried it. I brought a flashlight. It barely pierced the dark. The air inside was wet and stale, like something had been rotting in there forever. Halfway through, I started hearing the whispers, faint, jumbled, like dozens of voices overlapping, crying, laughing, pleading. I kept walking. Then came the train horn, loud, echoing, so close I ducked, even though I knew it couldn't be real. The tunnel trembled, the flashlight flickered. That's when I saw the silhouettes. Dozens of people standing on either side of the tunnel, perfectly still, watching me. I told myself not to stop, not to turn around, but someone grabbed my wrist. Cold fingers, nails digging into my skin. I ran, didn't look back, didn't stop until I was out in the moonlight, gasping for air. There was a red handprint on my arm. It stayed there for 3 days. No one believed me, but I know what I saw. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I still hear the train coming. Next story. There's a mirror in my grandmother's attic no one is allowed to touch. She told me it's not a real mirror, whatever that means. As a kid, I thought she was just being weird. But one summer, curiosity won. I snuck up there alone. The mirror was beautiful, tall, gold-framed and spotless. I stood in front of it, At first, nothing happened, but then my reflection blinked. I didn't. It tilted its head, smiled, and I ran. I told my grandmother. She just nodded and said, "That's why we don't look into it." She covered it with a black sheet and nailed the door shut. My uncle used to be a paramedic, quiet guy, never talked about work, until one Christmas Eve, after a few drinks, he told me a story. Said it happened in the early 90s, cold winter night. He and his partner responded to a 911 call from an old farmhouse out in the county, middle of nowhere. Caller hung up before saying a word. They pulled up, sirens off. The house was dark. No lights, no movement. But the front door was open. Inside, the air was freezing. The walls were covered in old wallpaper, peeling at the corners. Family photos still hung, faded and crooked. They found a woman in a rocking chair in the living room, late 40s, pale, still. At first, they thought she was dead, but her eyes were open. She was whispering. He leaned in to hear. She kept repeating one phrase over and over. "They're still in the walls." They called for backup, but the radio wouldn't work. Then the rocking chair stopped. She went silent, and from the walls, scratching, like dozens of tiny fingers clawing from the inside out. His partner bolted. He followed. When they looked back, the house was gone. Just an empty field, and their ambulance sitting in the middle. They never spoke of it again. But every Christmas, my uncle wakes up screaming. It started with the voice of a child. I live alone, in a small house on the edge of a rural town. It's quiet here, peaceful, or at least it was. The first night, I was brushing my teeth when I heard it, soft, high-pitched, coming from the hallway just outside the bathroom. "Can you play with me?" I froze. The hallway was empty. Every light was on. I live alone. I searched the house, heart pounding. Nothing. No sign of forced entry. No windows open. Just silence. The next night, it happened again. This time, I was in bed. "Can you play with me?" The voice was right next to my ear. I turned on every light. I slept with the TV on, door locked, kitchen knife under my pillow. The third night, the voice changed. "Why won't you play with me?" The tone was no longer innocent. It was angry, accusing. I felt the air grow cold. The lights flickered. When I looked into the hallway mirror, I saw a small handprint appear behind me. No child, just the mark. I called a local priest the next morning. He didn't even flinch when I told him what happened. He just nodded and said, "It's been a while since she's had company." He didn't explain. He blessed the house, lit a candle, and left. That night, I heard the voice again, but it didn't ask to play. It whispered, "You're mine now." And the candle the priest left behind was burning black. Next story. When I was a kid, my uncle told me a story that never left me. He said when he was 12, he got lost in the woods behind our family's farm. He wandered for hours, but eventually found a path, one he didn't recognize. Still, he followed it, hoping it would lead him home. Instead, it led him to a small cabin. The windows were dark, the door slightly open. He called out, but no one answered. Just as he turned to leave, he heard a voice from inside. "Come in." It sounded like our grandmother, but she'd died 2 years earlier. He ran. He told his parents, who searched the woods for days. No cabin, no path. Years later, he went back, older, braver, curious, and there it was. Same cabin, same door ajar, but this time, no voice. He stepped inside. The furniture was old, dusty, untouched for decades, but on the table was a photo of him as a child, standing in front of the cabin. Only, he'd never seen it before that day. Next story, I bought a used phone from a pawn shop. It worked fine, until I checked the photo gallery. There were hundreds of pictures, all taken in the same dimly lit room. Most showed a chair, an empty chair. But in the last dozen images, a man appeared, sitting, bound, eyes wide in terror. The final photo was the worst. The man was gone, and someone, or something, was standing in his place. A tall, faceless figure, arms too long, body twisted. I deleted the images, or tried to. They came back. Each night, new ones would appear. Eventually, the photos started showing my apartment, my living room, my hallway. Last night's photo was of me, sleeping, and just behind me, that same faceless figure. Closer than ever. Next story. My wife talks in her sleep. Usually, it's just mumbling, nonsense words or soft groans. But one night, she sat up suddenly and whispered, "He's under the bed." I laughed it off, told her to lie back down. She didn't respond, just stared at me, eyes wide open, then slowly turned her head toward the edge of the mattress. "He's listening," she whispered again. I looked under the bed. Nothing, but when I turned back, she was still staring at the floor. And then she said in a voice that wasn't hers, "He likes it when you check." I used to play hide and seek with my little brother. He was terrible at hiding. I'd always find him within seconds, behind the curtains, under the bed, in the closet. One day, I couldn't find him. I checked all the usual places, called his name. Nothing. Then I heard a whisper from inside the laundry hamper. "Don't open it." That's not me. I froze, because I'd already seen his shoes sticking out from under the couch. Next story, I found a phone on the sidewalk during my walk home. It was old, cracked, no case, but it still had power. Curious, I opened the photo gallery. There were only 2 pictures. The first was of my house. The second was of me, standing outside my bedroom window, taken last night. I dropped the phone. It buzzed in my hand. New message, turn around. Next story, I tucked my daughter in, kissed her forehead, and turned off the light. "Daddy, there's someone under my bed," she whispered. I knelt down and looked underneath. She was there, eyes wide, trembling. "Daddy," she said, "there's someone on my bed." Next story. Every morning, I hear knocking on my front door at exactly 3:33 a.m. When I open it, no one's there. I finally set up a camera. The footage showed me opening the door to myself, only I never remembered doing it. Next story, I got a call from my mom while at work. She asked why I didn't answer the door. Confused, I said, "I'm not home." She paused, then whispered, "But someone in your hoodie just walked in." Next story, I went to my grandpa's funeral. During the service, my phone vibrated with a message. "Help me. They're burying me." It was from his number. Next story, my roommate was snoring loudly all night. Annoyed, I got up to shake him awake, but he wasn't home. I was alone, and the snoring was coming from inside my closet. Next story, it started with a strange smell in my apartment. Not bad, just off, metallic, like pennies and soil. I thought it was the pipes, or maybe something rotting under the fridge, but nothing explained it. Then the photos on my walls began to tilt. At first, just a little. I'd fix them, and the next day, they'd be crooked again. Then more crooked, then upside down. My dog stopped sleeping in the living room. He'd bark at the air, hackles raised, teeth bared, at an empty corner. One night, I was woken up by the sound of whispering, dozens of voices, right outside my bedroom door. I opened it, but there was nothing there, until I turned around and saw my hallway mirror. Someone had written across it in the fog, "We live here too." Next story, I inherited an old clock from my grandfather. Big, antique, the kind with heavy ticking and a chime that rings every hour. The strange thing was, it never kept the right time. No matter how often I reset it, it always drifted, always slower than it should be. But the real problem started when it began ticking backwards. Every night, I'd wake up and hear the slow, deliberate tick, 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 reversing time. One night, I watched the minute hand crawl backward across midnight. Then I blinked, and it was 11:57 again. I lost 3 minutes. The next night, it happened again. But this time, I lost an hour. I tried smashing the clock. It didn't break. I threw it out. But it reappeared on my shelf the next day, ticking. Only now, it was ticking faster, backwards. Next story, I was driving home after a long shift. The roads were empty, the radio low, and I was trying not to fall asleep at the wheel. Then I saw him, a man standing in the middle of the road. I hit the brakes, heart pounding, but when the car stopped, he was gone. Shaking, I kept driving. 10 minutes later, I saw him again. Same man, same spot, just staring. Only now, he was smiling. I didn't stop this time. I flew past him, eyes forward, trying not to look. But I glanced in the rearview mirror, and he was in the back seat. My sister used to talk to the man in the ceiling. She was 4. I thought it was just a weird phase, an imaginary friend she invented to cope with loneliness. But she was specific. He watches when I sleep, she said, and he doesn't like when people ignore him. I laughed it off, until one night I heard her scream. She was pointing at the vent above her bed, shaking. "There," she cried. "He's crawling." I checked. Nothing. But that night, I had a dream. The ceiling peeled away like skin, long fingers reaching down, pulling me toward a black void. When I woke up, my nails were full of drywall dust. And my sister, she stopped talking entirely. Next story, I keep my phone on silent at night, so I didn't hear it vibrate at 2:13 a.m. But in the morning, I saw the missed call from my own number. No voicemail, just the timestamp. Out of curiosity, I played back my security camera footage. At 2:13 a.m., someone stood outside my window, holding a phone to their ear. They looked just like me, only they were smiling, and I wasn't. I used to work night security at a nursing home, mostly quiet. The halls dim, the residents asleep, the buzz of fluorescent lights keeping me company. But every night at 3:17 a.m., one of the call lights would go off. Always the same room, room 209. It had been empty for months. I'd reset the light. No one inside. Nothing disturbed. But like clockwork, 3:17, ding. Eventually, I asked the day staff about it. One nurse got pale and said, "That was Margaret's room." "Who's Margaret?" "She died in her sleep at 3:17 a.m. That night, when the light went off again, I didn't go in. But I swear I heard footsteps behind the door, and someone softly humming an old lullaby. My neighbor disappeared last winter. One day, he was shoveling snow from his driveway, and the next, gone. No goodbye, no moving van, just gone. The strange part, his house never changed. Lights still flickered at night. The smell of wood smoke drifted from his chimney. Packages still arrived on his porch, but were never taken inside. I got curious. One night, I crept up to his window and peeked in. Everything was exactly how he'd left it, except for the living room. In the center of the room was a single armchair, and in it sat my neighbor, but he wasn't moving, wasn't breathing. He was completely still, eyes wide open, as if staring at something behind me. I turned around. There was nothing there. When I looked back in, the chair was empty. Next story. We found the cabin during a weekend hike. Me, my brother, and 2 friends. It wasn't on the map, just a small, crumbling structure in the middle of the woods. We dared each other to go in. We were stupid like that. Inside, it was dark and cold. Dust everywhere, except for one thing. A wooden table in the center of the room, and on that table, 4 dolls. They looked handmade, old, with button eyes and stitched mouths. But the worst part? Each one wore clothes that matched ours exactly. Same colors, same styles. Even the tiny necklace I was wearing. We left immediately, creeped out. That night, my brother was the first to vanish. The next night, one of our friends. On the third night, I burned the doll that looked like me. And somehow, I'm still here. But sometimes I hear tiny screams in the wind. Next story. When I was a kid, my grandfather warned me never to whistle at night. Bad things hear it, he said. Things that want to answer. I thought it was just one of those weird old man superstitions. Until the night I forgot and whistled as I walked home through the woods. Just once. A low, lazy tune. But something whistled back. It wasn't an echo. It wasn't a bird. It was the same tune, just slower and closer. I ran. I didn't stop until I was home. Doors locked, heart pounding. That night, I heard tapping on my bedroom window. I lived on the second floor. I never whistled again. But sometimes, I still hear that tune outside my house. And it's always just a little off. Next story. The voicemail came at 2:43 a.m. It was my own voice, whispering, "Don't go to work tomorrow." I sat there staring at my phone, chills running through me. I hadn't made that call. I'd been asleep. I played it again. My voice, same tone, same rasp. "Don't go to work tomorrow." I called my boss, faked being sick, stayed home. At 9:12 a.m., the news broke. An explosion at the office. Faulty wiring. Half the building gone. I checked my call logs. There was no outgoing call that night. No voicemail on the server. Just a blank space where the message had been. I don't know who warned me or what version of me made the call, but I owed them my life. Next story. My daughter started drawing strange things. Black scribbles. Figures with hollow eyes. A shadow that hovered near her bed. She's 5. When I asked her about it, she said, "That's my friend. He helps me when you're asleep." "Where did you meet him?" "In the mirror." I checked her room. The mirror on her closet door was covered in tiny handprints. Too big to be hers. Too many fingers. I moved her to another room. That night, I dreamt of standing in her old room, looking into the mirror, and seeing myself blink, half a second too late. The next morning, the mirror was cracked, and on it, written in condensation, were the words, "Bring her back." Next story. The forest behind my house was always quiet. Too quiet. Birds never sang. Animals never wandered through. Even the wind seemed to avoid it. As a kid, I was told to stay out. "The woods don't want you," my grandmother used to say. But one day, I went in anyway. I was 12. Curious. Tired of the warnings. The deeper I walked, the colder it got. Then, I found it. A perfect circle of stones, blackened like they'd been burned. And in the center, a tree unlike any I'd ever seen. Twisted. Bark like charcoal. And eyes. Eyes in the wood following me. I ran. Years later, the forest is still there. Still silent. But now, when I walk past, the tree is closer to the edge than before. When my sister died, we buried her in the family plot behind our old farmhouse. 3 days later, she came home. She didn't knock. She didn't say a word. She just stood in the kitchen, wet and pale, her dress still covered in dirt. My parents acted like nothing was wrong. They set a plate for her, asked how her day was. I screamed. I begged them to see, but they just smiled. Isn't it nice to have her back? I ran upstairs and locked the door. Through the keyhole, I saw her standing in the hallway, smiling, waiting. The next morning, the door was open, and on my bed was a note, written in her handwriting. "You're next." Next story. I found a USB drive on my windshield when I left the grocery store. No label, just a black stick, barely used. Curiosity 1. I plugged it into my laptop. One file. A video. It showed the back of my head. I was standing in line, buying milk and bread. Just minutes earlier, the footage was shaky, like from a phone camera. Someone had been recording me. I clicked ahead in the timeline. There I was again, driving home. Then walking into my apartment. Then sitting at my desk. Live feed. The final frame was me. sitting at my desk, watching the video. Then the screen went black, and the webcam light turned on. Next story. My grandfather had a shed in the backyard. He always kept locked. Old tools, he said. Nothing for you in there. After he passed, we had to clean out the house. I found the key in a coffee can. The shed creaked open like it hadn't been touched in decades. Inside were hundreds of Polaroids. Each one showed a person sleeping. Different people, different beds. All of them shot from the same angle. Above the bed, looking down. At the bottom of each photo, a date and a name. Some were recent. One was mine. Last Tuesday. I hadn't told anyone I'd started sleeping alone again. And that night, I slept with the lights on. Next story, I used to get sleep paralysis often. Always the same thing. A dark figure standing at the foot of my bed, whispering something I couldn't hear. I learned to fight it, to wake myself up. But last week, it changed. The figure got closer, leaning down near my face. I still couldn't move, couldn't scream. He whispered again. Only this time, I heard it. You're not dreaming anymore. When I woke up, I was standing in the hallway, door open, feet dirty, mouth dry, and on the wall, scratched deep into the paint, were the words: "We switched. Super. Рад, что нравится. Вот еще 4 длинные истории. Каждая начинается с next story. Как и раньше. Next story. When I moved into the old apartment downtown, the landlord warned me about the noise from the pipes. They rattle, he said. Old building. Don't worry if you hear tapping at night. He was right. Every night around 3 a.m., I'd hear rhythmic tapping coming from inside the walls. Tap, 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 like Morse code. But one night, the tapping stopped. Instead, I heard scratching. Slow, deliberate, then a whisper. Can you hear me now? I froze. The whisper came again, closer. I know you can. I pushed my bed away from the wall and pressed my ear to the plaster. Behind it, something whispered louder. I'm almost through. I moved out the next day. 2 weeks later, the building was condemned. They found a bricked-up room behind my bedroom wall with claw marks on the inside. Next story. My daughter came home from school with a drawing. She said it was her invisible friend named Oliver. I smiled and hung it on the fridge. Just a stick figure in a black hoodie. Every day, a new drawing. Oliver at the playground. Oliver in her classroom. Oliver standing by her bed. Then one morning, I woke up to a drawing pinned to my pillow. It showed me sleeping. Oliver standing beside me, eyes red, smiling. I rushed to my daughter's room. She was gone. The window was open, and the last drawing was taped to the glass. It showed the two of them walking into the woods, hand in hand. Next story, my roommate started talking in his sleep. At first, it was gibberish, mumbles, twitching. Then it became clearer. Names, dates, places. One night, I heard him say my name. Then, he knows. Get rid of him. I thought it was a bad dream. Until the next morning, when I found a note on the fridge. Don't go to sleep tonight. I confronted him. He laughed it off, said I must have dreamed it. But that night, I pretended to sleep. Around 2 a.m., I heard him get up, bare feet across the floor. I cracked one eye open. He was standing over me, holding a knife, whispering, "You should have listened." I bought an old photo album at a yard sale. Most of the photos were black and white, showing a smiling family in front of a farmhouse. Mother, father, 3 children. As I flipped through the pages, I noticed something strange. In every picture, there was a shadowy figure in the background, sometimes in a window, sometimes behind a tree, sometimes in the mirror. The family never seemed to notice, but the figure got closer in every photo. By the last page, the shadow stood directly behind the youngest child, hand on her shoulder. The girl wasn't smiling anymore. I turned the page. It was blank. until I blinked. Then a new photo faded in. It was me, sitting in my living room, looking at the album. And behind me, that same shadow. Next story. My grandma used to tell me not to answer the phone after midnight. It's never for you, she'd whisper. I thought it was just a spooky superstition. Until last week. At 12:03 a.m., my landline rang. No caller ID. I answered. A woman's voice said, "Tell them I'm still here." Then silence. I hung up, chilled. The next night, again, 12:03. Same voice. He doesn't know I never left. This happened for 4 nights. On the 5th, my phone rang at 12:03, but I didn't answer. I let it ring. In the morning, I found a voicemail. It was the same woman, but this time, she was crying. "You heard me," she whispered. "Now I'm part of your house too." My phone hasn't rung since, but every night at 12:03, something knocks from inside my walls. Next story, I used to babysit for a family with 3 kids. The youngest, Lily, was always drawing. One night, she showed me a crayon sketch of their family, but there was an extra figure, all black, no face, just standing behind her parents. "Who's that?" I asked. She smiled. "That's Mr. Longneck. He watches us sleep." I laughed it off. Later that night, after the kids went to bed, I heard footsteps upstairs. Checked the rooms. Nothing. Then I saw Lily's drawing had changed. Now, Mr. Longneck was closer, his hand on her dad's shoulder. The next morning, the parents were gone. No note, no explanation. Just Lily, sitting at the table, drawing again. "Now he watches me," she whispered. Next story, I installed a smart mirror in my bathroom. It had a motion sensor and time display. Pretty basic stuff. One night, while brushing my teeth, I saw a smudge on the mirror. I wiped it. Nothing there. Then the lights flickered, and the mirror showed me brushing my teeth, except I wasn't moving. My reflection just stood still, smiling. I turned to run, but the bathroom door wouldn't open. When I looked back, the mirror version of me was writing something with foggy breath. "Stay still long enough, and we'll trade." I smashed the mirror. The power came back. But sometimes, in reflective surfaces, shadows move a little slower than I do. Next story. They say when you see the same stranger in your dreams 3 nights in a row, it means something. I saw her 5 times. A woman in a red dress, pale skin, eyes like smoke. She never spoke, just stood across the street from my house in every dream. On the 6th night, she was in my hallway. On the 7th, she stood at the foot of my bed. I tried everything, stayed awake, took sleeping pills, even slept in hotels. Didn't matter. She found me. Last night, I didn't dream. I woke up instead, to her whispering in my ear. "You finally stopped running." And when I opened my eyes, my bedroom window was open, and her red dress was on the floor. Next story, I found a USB drive in a library book. No label, no casing, just the chip and metal. Curious, I plugged it into my laptop. One file, a video named lookbehindYou.mp4. I hesitated, then clicked. It was grainy footage, night vision, a man walking through a house, filming everything, room to room, door to door. I didn't recognize the place until he entered the kitchen. It was my kitchen. Same countertops, same clock, same chipped tile near the fridge. I paused the video, looked around. Identical. When I hit play again, the man was in the hallway. Heading to my room, I ripped the drive out. The screen went black. Then the laptop camera light blinked on. Just once, then off again. I haven't slept since. And every morning, my bedroom door is slightly more open than the night before. When my dog died, I couldn't let go. He was my best friend for 10 years. 2 days after I buried him, I heard scratching at the back door. I opened it. Nothing. Just paw prints. Muddy. Leading inside. I checked the house. No intruders. but his favorite toy was missing from the shelf. That night, I heard growling under the bed. Low, familiar. I turned on the light. Nothing there. In the morning, his leash was lying by the door. I called a priest. He told me dogs don't haunt people, but something else might pretend to be your dog. He was right, because the next time I heard scratching, it came from inside the walls, and the growl didn't sound like him anymore. Next story, I used to work night shifts at a roadside diner. Mostly truckers and late-night travelers. But one guy, he came in every Wednesday at 2:14 a.m. Never missed it. Ordered black coffee. Never touched it. Just sat in the booth, staring at the same corner of the ceiling. After 3 months, I asked him why. He said, "That's where I died." I laughed. He didn't. Said his truck crashed on this very stretch of road in '92. Said he crawled to the diner, back when it was just rubble, and waited. "I'm still waiting," he whispered, "for someone to remember me." Last week, he didn't show up. His photo's now taped under that corner of the ceiling. No one knows who put it there. Next story. In the town where I grew up, there's a bridge no one crosses after dark. They say it's haunted by a woman in white, searching for her missing child. As kids, we dared each other to walk across it. One night, I took the dare. Halfway across, I heard sobbing, then whispering. Then someone grabbed my hand. I turned. No one there. But I felt tiny fingers. A child's. I ran. When I got home, there was a note in my pocket. "Now you're her child, and every birthday since." I hear her singing lullabies outside my window. Next story, I inherited my uncle's cabin after he passed. He was a quiet man. No family. Lived alone in the woods. In the attic, I found hundreds of cassette tapes, each labeled by date. Curious, I played one. It was hours of silence, until the end. Then, whispering, "Don't listen to them," a voice hissed. "They lie." I played another, different voice, same warning. Some tapes had screams, others had static. One just had heavy breathing for 3 hours. But the last tape was different. It had my name, and a recording of me opening the attic door. I hadn't been in the cabin more than 20 minutes. Next story. We found a locked door in our basement during renovations. Heavy steel, no key. My husband wanted to ignore it, but I was curious. We hired someone to break it open. Behind it, a narrow hallway, and at the end, another door. This one was wooden, and on it was carved, "If you open this, you agree to stay." We thought it was a prank, old owners being weird. So we opened it. Inside, a small room, a mirror, and a chair facing it. That's it. But when I looked in the mirror, my reflection was smiling. I wasn't. And when we tried to leave, the hallway was gone. Just 4 walls, and the chair, and the mirror, still smiling. Next story. 3 years ago, I took a photo of my friends while camping. Just a fun shot. Around the fire, smiling. When I got home, I looked at the picture again. There was someone else in the photo, in the trees, watching us. No one remembered seeing anyone there. I asked around. A park ranger said, "You weren't the first to see her." I said her. He nodded. "She died out there. A girl, got lost, never found. But sometimes, she finds people." I deleted the photo. 2 nights later, my phone turned on by itself. The photo was back. Edited. Everyone's faces scratched out, except hers. And she was closer this time. Next story. When I was a kid, I had an imaginary friend named Milo. We played together, talked. He was my best friend. My parents thought it was cute, until I started locking my bedroom door at night. I told them Milo didn't like being ignored. I forgot about him as I got older, but last month, I found an old box in the attic. My childhood drawings. One showed me sleeping, and a tall shadow with white eyes standing at the foot of my bed. I remembered drawing that, and writing his name underneath. Milo. That night, I heard scratching at my door. and a voice I hadn't heard in 20 years. Wanna play again? Next story, I work at a funeral home. One night, I was doing paperwork when I heard knocking. It came from one of the viewing rooms. I checked. Empty. Lights off. The knocking came again. 3 slow taps. I followed the sound to a closed casket. I opened it. The body was gone. Only a note inside. Wrong casket. I ran to the security room, checked the cameras. The hallway footage between 2:14 and 2:17 was missing. The casket, still empty. 2 weeks later, someone left flowers at our door with a card. Thanks for letting me out. When I moved into my apartment, the landlord said, "If you ever hear knocking from the pipes, don't knock back." I laughed it off, thought it was some weird local superstition. But one night, I heard it. 3 knocks from inside the bathroom wall. Out of curiosity, I knocked back 3 times. Nothing. The next night, 4 knocks, then 5, then 6. Now it happens every night. Louder, closer. And last night, I didn't knock at all, but something inside the wall did, just once, followed by a whisper, "Why'd you stop?" Next story. When I was in college, I worked nights at a gas station in a rural area. It was mostly quiet, until one night, a man came in, dirty, barefoot, wide-eyed. He looked terrified. "I need to use your phone," he said. "It's coming." I handed it to him. He dialed, but no one picked up. Then he dropped the phone and whispered, "Too late." He ran outside and disappeared into the woods. I called the police. They searched, found no trace. But for the next week, every night, at exactly 3:12 a.m., my station's lights flickered, and something walked past the windows, always just out of view. One night, I stayed hidden behind the counter. The power cut out, and I heard breathing right next to me. When the lights came back, nothing was there, but muddy barefoot prints across the floor. Next story, I volunteered at a crisis hotline for years. One night, I got a call from a whispering voice. "She's in the house," they said. I asked for the address. The caller kept repeating, "She's in the house. She's behind the curtain. She's..." Then silence. I called emergency services, gave them the number, the transcript. They tracked it. The call came from inside our own building, from one of the unused staff rooms. I went there with security. There was no one, just an old phone, unplugged, disconnected from the wall, still warm to the touch. Next story, I used to babysit for a family with a baby monitor, the kind with a camera and a screen. One night, I was watching a movie. When I glanced at the screen, the baby wasn't alone. A figure stood in the corner of the nursery, tall, thin, unmoving. I ran upstairs. The room was empty, door locked from the inside. I checked the camera feed again. Just the baby now. But the figure started showing up more often. Sometimes closer. Sometimes waving. I stopped babysitting. But a week later, the parents called me. Terrified. The baby kept pointing to the corner and saying, "That man." There was no one there. At least, not anymore. Next story. A couple years ago, my grandma passed away. She lived alone in a big, creaky house. After her funeral, I stayed overnight to help clean. At 2 a.m., I heard footsteps upstairs, but no one else was there. I went up. Her bedroom door was closed. It opened slowly as I approached. On the bed was her old music box, playing by itself, and beside it, a photo of me as a child, but the face was scratched out. I threw the photo away. Next morning, it was back on the nightstand. The scratch marks were deeper. That night, I didn't sleep, and neither did she. I heard the music box again, and a voice whisper my name. Next story, I was 8, when I got my first imaginary friend. Her name was Eliza. She wore old-fashioned clothes, and always wanted to play hide-and-seek. My parents thought it was cute, until I started talking about things I shouldn't have known, like the locked door in the attic, or the names of relatives who had died before I was born. I told them Eliza showed me a photograph. They found one in the attic weeks later, faded and crumpled. It showed a girl standing outside the house, same dress I described. On the back, Eliza, 1893. After that, my parents got rid of everything in the attic, but I still saw her at night. Sometimes she whispered secrets in my ear. Sometimes she just stared. When we moved, I thought it would stop, but she came too. I was 25 when I found a box in my new home's basement. Inside, Eliza's photograph, still smiling. Next story. When I was in high school, I had a friend named Brian. Quiet kid, obsessed with drawing. But all he ever drew were houses. The same house, again and again. Windows in the wrong places. Hallways that looped forever. Stairs that ended in brick walls. We asked why. He said, because I see it when I sleep, and sometimes when I'm awake. One day, Brian stopped showing up. We were told he moved away suddenly. A year later, I found a drawing in my locker. It was the house. But this time, there were people in the windows. Their faces looked like ours. And one of them looked terrified, with Brian's name scratched underneath. I never saw him again, but sometimes, when I'm half asleep, I see the hallway he described, and I think I hear him calling for help. There's a road outside my hometown no one talks about. Locals call it the Loop. It appears only at night. A side road off the highway. No signs, no lights. People say if you turn onto it, you'll keep driving in circles. Same trees, same bends. No matter how far you go, you never reach an exit. My cousin tried it once. We found his car the next morning, out of gas, engine still warm. He was in the driver's seat, eyes wide open, mouth full of dirt. He never spoke again. Doctors said it was trauma. I say it was the Loop, because weeks later, I had a dream. I was driving that road, and my cousin was in the back seat, grinning. Next story, I used to rent an apartment above an old bookstore. Late one night, I heard someone walking around downstairs, but the shop was closed. No one had a key except the owner, and he was on vacation. I went down to check. Books were scattered on the floor. Candles had been lit, and in the center of the room, someone had drawn a large symbol, a circle with runes and slashes. I called the police. They found no forced entry, nothing on the cameras. That night, I couldn't sleep. My walls were covered in whispers, not written, spoken, in a language I didn't know. I moved out 2 days later, but every now and then, I wake up to that voice again, saying my name, over and over, and each time, it's closer. Next story. When I worked night shifts at the hospital, I got used to weird things. Empty wheelchairs rolling on their own. Lights flickering for no reason. Voices on the intercom that no one else heard. But one night, something different happened. I was walking past the nursery when I saw a woman standing inside. Long black hair, hospital gown. She was leaning over one of the cribs. I stepped in, ready to ask who she was. But the room was empty. No woman, no sound, just a faint smell of smoke. Later, I checked the security footage. There she was, plain as day. But the crib she stood over, it had been empty for years. A fire took the baby, and the mother. Every nurse knows the story, but no one talks about the woman who still comes back, looking. Next story. A friend of mine worked at a call center, mostly customer support. Boring stuff. One day, he got a call from a man asking for help resetting his password. Normal enough, until the man started describing things on my friend's desk. Your coffee mug is chipped on the side, he said. You should really water that plant. My friend laughed nervously, thinking it was a prank. Then the caller said, "Don't turn around." My friend froze. He was alone in the building, last shift of the night. The call disconnected. When he finally turned, no one was there. But there was a note taped to the back of his chair. It just said, "See you tomorrow." He quit the next day. But sometimes, late at night, he still gets blocked calls and hears breathing on the line. Next story. There's a house on the corner of my street no one lives in. No mail, no lights, no signs of life. But every Halloween, someone carves a pumpkin and puts it on the porch. Different design every year. We used to think it was a neighbor being funny. Until one year, we watched the house all night. No one came. The pumpkin just appeared. Around 2 a.m. That year, the face was different. It looked like someone screaming. A week later, the boy across the street went missing. Police never found him, but his parents swore they saw his reflection in the pumpkin's glossy surface. The house is still empty, and the pumpkins still show up every Halloween. Next story. My grandmother had a mirror she kept covered. Always said it was not for looking. When I asked why, she told me, "Some reflections don't belong to you." After she passed, I inherited the mirror. I didn't think much of it, unwrapped it, hung it in my hallway. That night, I saw something strange. When I walked past, my reflection smiled before I did. I laughed it off, but the next morning, there were scratches on the wall, deep ones, right beside the mirror, like someone had been trying to claw their way out. I covered it, moved it to the attic, but sometimes, when the house is quiet, I still hear something scratching from the ceiling, and I know it's waiting. Next story, I rented a cabin deep in the woods for some alone time. No cell signal, no neighbors, just nature. It was peaceful. The first night, I lit a fire and read a book. Simple, quiet. But around midnight, I heard tapping on the window. I figured it was a branch in the wind, until I remembered there were no trees that close. The tapping continued, steady, deliberate. I walked over and turned on the porch light. Nothing. No footprints in the snow. No broken branches. I locked every door and tried to sleep. At 3:12 a.m., I woke up to the front door slowly creaking open. My breath caught. There was a note on the floor just inside. "Thanks for letting me in." My uncle owned an old diner off the highway. It hadn't seen much business in years, but he kept it running out of habit. Said it gave him a reason to get up in the morning. One summer, I worked the night shift for him. Easy money, I thought. But there was a rule. If a man came in after midnight, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and a black coat, I wasn't to speak to him. Just serve him a black coffee and leave the bill on the counter. I thought it was a joke. Until one night, he came. He didn't speak, didn't move much, just stared straight ahead with sunken eyes that didn't blink. I poured his coffee, left the bill, and retreated to the kitchen. When I peeked back, the coffee was untouched, but the cup was empty, the bill was gone, and there was a note where I'd left it. "Thank you. One more night bought." I never asked my uncle what it meant, and he never explained. But every night after that, I made sure the coffee was hot, just in case. Next story. At my university, there's a building no one talks about. It's technically abandoned, but lights still flicker inside sometimes. Security says it's just old wiring. But students whisper about room 413. They say if you knock 4 times, pause, then once more. The door opens. A friend of mine tried it. He thought it was funny. Knocked, just like they said. The door creaked open by itself. He stepped in and screamed. By the time campus security arrived, he was curled up in the corner, eyes wide. He wouldn't speak, wouldn't move. The doctors called it catatonia. He never came back to class. But sometimes, I see him outside the building, staring at room 413, like he's still waiting to be let in. Next story. I went camping with 2 friends last year. We found a beautiful spot deep in the forest, far from any trails or campsites. No cell service, no people, just us and the trees. The first night, everything was fine. We drank, told stories, laughed. The second night, we heard footsteps around the tent. At first, we thought it was an animal. Then we heard breathing, low, slow, like someone standing just inches away. We stayed silent. In the morning, we found symbols drawn around our tent in the dirt. Perfect circles, identical markings. None of us recognized them. We packed and left. Fast. On the drive home, I opened my backpack to grab a snack. Inside was a single Polaroid photo. We were all asleep in the tent, but the photo was taken from outside. Next story. There's a road near my town people call the Stretch. It's a 10-mile highway with no turns, no exits, and no streetlights. Just trees on both sides and thick fog at night. People say if you drive it after midnight, your radio starts picking up voices. I tried it once. At mile 3, my phone shut off. At mile 5, the fog was so thick I couldn't see the lines. At mile 7, I heard static, then a whisper. It said my name. Then, "You shouldn't be here." At mile 9, a figure stepped onto the road, pale, barefoot. She raised her hand, and my car stopped without me touching the brake. She walked up to my window and whispered, "Turn back before you forget who you are." I floored it. When I hit mile 10, everything went back to normal. But for weeks, I kept hearing her voice on quiet radio stations. And every time I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw fog behind me. Next story I used to love old bookstores. The smell of paper, the endless shelves, the feeling of getting lost. One day, I stumbled into a store I'd never seen before. No sign outside, just a wooden door with a bell that didn't ring. Inside, it was quiet, dusty, but warm. An old man greeted me, said I was free to look around, but warned me not to open any book with no title. I wondered. Most books had strange titles. The Clock That Watches, Rooms Without Doors, Bones in the Attic. But one shelf had dozens of blank books, no titles, no authors, just worn covers. I picked one up. It opened to the first page. June 12th, he walked in. He picked this book. He opened the cover. I froze. The next line said, "He keeps reading. Then, he turns the page." I slammed it shut and ran. When I got home, there was a blank book on my bed. The first line now reads, "He writes the ending himself." Next story. If you've made it this far, you're one of us now. Someone who listens in the dark. Someone who follows the whispers. Someone who waits for the next story, even when the fire's almost out. And maybe, just maybe, you're the kind of person these stories are written for. So if the shadows kept you company tonight, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share the darkness. Because next time, we'll go even deeper. Sleep well. And remember, they follow.